Okay then, so let's talk about the Metal Gear Solid Master Collection, Volume 1. A lot of people were quite excited for this, and I've been pretty disappointed with basically what Konami has essentially done, which is very little. But we'll break it down, and the pros and the cons, I guess you could say. First things first, so obviously the Master Collection has Metal Gear Solid 1, Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty, and Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater. It also has the MSX2 releases of Metal Gear and Metal Gear, sorry, 2 Solid Snake. And it also has the NES games, which are actually quite rare, but I believe they're not canon to. Well, the second one isn't, I believe, as far as I'm aware. Which I'd like to see them remake both of those games, do a modern interpretation of those two games, and finish the story essentially of Big Boss. But anyway, so it's quite rare to see them. So this collection has been getting a lot of mixed reviews. A lot of people quite disappointed. Now, obviously, there are some cool little features in this collection. You've got the digital novels or graphic novels, and some of the scripts, I believe, for the games. Which is this is kind of cool stuff, but I would prefer personally to see that stuff released physically in a book or something, because I think that'd just be for a collector a little bit more interesting. And like obviously these MSX games and the NES games are just the same thing. They're just 2D sprites, so based games. So there's not a lot you can do with them. Um, but the PlayStation games they should be doing a lot more with these games. So Metal Gear Solid 1, for instance, that runs on an emulator, and it's the same 240p resolution, and the frame rate is also the same at 30 frames a second. And Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty, and Snake Eater are essentially the same. They're just ports of the Bluepoint HD remasters from 2011, which I've shown on my channel. I've got it digitally, and I've got the Legacy collection, which I believe it might be a US exclusive. Um, so again, I mean they're on. That is quite disappointing. They're on PS5, Series X, and Switch, and they're all running pretty much at the minimal, which is 720p. So 1280 by 720 presentation on all three platforms, and even PC. So you can tell they have done very to little work on this collection. Um, and we'll get into that in a minute. But the even the PC version is 720p. No graphical boosts. I don't imagine there's any sort of features for DLSS or FSR. You probably wouldn't need it with these old games anyway, but it's a shame that none of this stuff has been implemented. And they are still patching, and there are more patches coming through, but it is a pretty bare bones release, to be honest. They have done very, very little work. And again, the Metal Gear Solid 1 is an emulated version of the PS1 version, PS1 game. So it looks even worse than, well, worse. It looks rougher than the PS1 game, and it does. The old game does look pretty rough by today's standards, but you put aside the graphics, the actual gameplay, and the story is still as interesting now as it was when it came out in 1998. So there are two versions of that game. So you've got the well, I'm in the UK, so 25 frames a second probably won't bother me if I'm honest. I collect games and I've got a mixture of US and PAL releases for different systems, and but you can download the US version and get 60 or 60 and get 30 frames a second at 60 hertz and not 50 hertz. But I know they did that with the PS1 Classic. Some of the games on there were PAL releases, which apparently people in the US weren't too happy about, which I can kind of understand to some degree. But doesn't bother you if you're not really used to it. But everything nowadays should be 60 hertz. There's no reason for it, really. So, and again on Switch, every single one of these games apparently is a singular game. it's not in one big collection like the HD collection was when it came out in 2011, which is kind of weird. You've got obviously language options. Again, your digital master book, which is quite interesting. Um, Manuscripts, and obviously the voice graphic novels for the both Metal Gear Solid 1 and 2 is kind of a cool idea. And then you got the special VR missions, which in Europe and North America was another game essentially. It was just VR missions. I never ever picked it up or played it. And apparently in Japan, they got a massive big release that had everything in it all at once. So once again, we sort of lose out Western games in some degree. Now you do have trophy support. I imagine achievements, which might be what sways most people. I mean, it has been a long time since these games have been mainstream as such. I mean, if you look up a lot of polls and stuff on YouTube, a lot of people haven't even played these games, which makes me feel ancient beyond belief at this point. But again, the price is £50, which I don't know. I think £50 is a bit. It's overly expensive for what you're getting. I would personally wait for a sale. I would buy them separately, possibly. But I would just pick up the if you're on Series X. I mean, you can play those games backwards compat, and they look better than this Master Collection does. Other than Metal Gear Solid 1. There are some ways to get the games running higher on PC, like at 4K and stuff. Thank God. But these games should be running at 1080p and 4K. There's really no excuse. I mean, Konami are not a company that have a particularly good reputation these days. Anyway, they used to be beloved, and they just left gaming after the whole Konami Kojima split. They released Metal Gear Survive, which was one of possibly the worst Metal Gear games I think I've ever seen. It was appallingly bad. And they were even charging for an extra save file. You could only save the game, save one game, and they'd charge you for the DLC if you wanted another save file, which is absolutely pathetic. So this is a company that has pretty much fallen into disarray anyway. And they went off and did their pachinko machines for about 10 years now. So they're trying to get back into gaming. And they have done some good stuff in the last couple of recent years, like the Castlevania collection. I think there was like 3 of them. There was Castlevania, Castlevania Advance, and I believe there was one other collection as well, I think. And I've picked them up digitally, and they've made a bit of effort with them. But those games are 2D sprite based, so I don't know, it's a great deal you can do with those games, really, in the grand scheme of things. And what else did they do? They did some other stuff. I've done a couple of other collections, I believe, as well. But that's what I can't even remember off the top of my head. But so I don't quite know why they made no effort with this, because they're doing a remake of Metal Gear Solid 3. So I don't want to hate on it. I think the best thing is just to wait with bated breath and see where this goes. And hopefully they'll look at the feedback people are giving them, and they'll actually make more effort. Because there's been there was a video of David Hayter on YouTube the other day saying there's more to come. So I really hope they're going to do. I don't think Snake Eater really needs a remake, but I get the fact that it was 2004 it came out, so it's quite an old game by today's standards. So, but back to the emulation is being handled by M2. So you're getting with the PS1, you're getting a base, or the emulated version, you're getting a base resolution of 320 by 240. So to me, it doesn't really bother me, but it might be more difficult for people that aren't used to games like looking like that. And that will bring me across in a minute to the talking point about the current remake of Metal Gear Solid 1 that's already been out since 2004, which was the Twin Snakes. So that's, That's I wonder whether that'll be part of this any of these Master Collection volumes, because I don't know whether there's any legality issues with can they port Twin Snakes, or is it predominantly just is it something that Nintendo still has locked in because it was an exclusive for the GameCube, and that's the version I've got, and it's a really really expensive game. You're talking 50-60 pound upwards for that particular game, and it's a good game, but it's not quite as good as the original. They've made some changes to that particular version. Snake flips over rockets. There's more like kind of a John Woo sort of arts type action has been added to it. So, and the music's not quite the same. There are some slight differences. There's the Grey Fox Ninja's revoiced, but these aren't necessarily bad things. It's just a different interpretation of the original Metal Gear Solid. But if you're going to experience Metal Gear Solid and you don't have an issue with graphics and stuff, I would still go for the PS1 version. That's not particularly cheap on eBay either. That's about 30-40 quid now. And again, obviously, depending on how long these discs are going to last. So I would hold out personally, unless you desperately need to play these games with trophy support and achievements. So it's a bit of a disappointment. Obviously they're going to continue to keep patching it, so hopefully they'll improve it. But 1080p or 4K is what you really need, really, for these games. There really is no excuse. And if you download the emulator of DuckStation, you can force a higher resolution anyway. And DuckStation actually looks better than this Master Collection. And in fact, they've actually done a comparison between the Master Collection and the HD Collection. And the HD Collection from 2011 actually looks better. They've added some kind of filter for the Master Collection, and it makes the games look less detailed. I mean, well, these games are quite old anyway, but if you're gonna, these are probably the most beloved games, of the would be the 6th generation. So I really boggles the mind. But I guess we'll see where they go with this. Obviously, you've still got another Master Collection to come. You've still got the one game everyone's obsessed about is Guns of the Patriots. Now, Guns of the Patriots, it's not a bad game, but it's a mixed bag game. The best bit of that game, in my personal opinion, is when you go back to Shadow Moses. It's awesome to just run around the area and see how dilapidated it is, and how it's all run down, and there's been nobody there for decades, and it's just fascinating to go back to that part of the game, and you get to see a lot of flashbacks. It's sort of member berries in a way, I guess you could say. So that's the game that's been stuck on PS3 since that system came out, and it's never had another port. So that's what I'm fascinated to see, if they'll be able to get that off the PS3. I imagine they will do. But your HD collection, unless you really, really desperately want the modern things like the achievements and stuff and trophy support, I'd just go for the HD collection. If you've still got a 360 or a PS3 kicking around. Obviously for the Switch, on a Nintendo system, slightly different situation. It might be worth it because they've never had that on the Nintendo other than Twin Snakes. And again, the Master Collection is just basically the ports of the HD games, which had some improvements from is it the Subsistence versions of those games? But there are some bits cut out, like there's no I've never played the Subsistence versions. Like they had some extras, like there was a skateboarding section and an Ape Escape section, which was obviously PS2 exclusives at the time. So, but I mean, anti-aliasing as well is on the HD collection, whereas it's not on the Switch version, so it makes the edges look not quite. What's the word I'm looking for? Straight and sort of thing. I don't fully understand it. When you see the image, you'll know for yourself. But I guess in the last thing I can say, I guess, is in mainstream people, normal people probably won't give a damn about this. I'm probably getting to the point where I'm just people don't care about a lot of this stuff. It's only your more hardcore gamers that will notice this stuff and think, well, this isn't very, very good. Now, the only other thing I could say is that the PS2 Metal Gear Solid 2 Sons of Liberty, that runs at 60 frames a second on a PS2. That runs at 60 on PS5 and Series X and I presume Series S. But it's capped to 30 on Switch. Now, I don't know why that is. Doesn't make a great deal of sense given how if the PS2 could do 60, I'm sure the Switch can. So sounds like there's something technical going on there, and they can't get it running at the right. Well, they can't get it running faster than it should be. So that's a very, very odd thing. Now, I believe with some of the games, there also is a mixture of 60, 30, and 15 frames a second in some of the cutscenes on Metal Gear Solid 2. There are some control things. I believe these games, as of yet, don't support mouse and keyboard, which for a PC release is, to say tragic could be an understatement. That's absolutely unacceptable. Um, so as much as I probably am coming across as I'm probably hating a bit here on Konami, they've got the opportunity to change this and make things better, because I'm very curious about the Metal Gear Solid 3 remake they're doing, because essentially they're just using the same audio from the original game. So if it's a remake, are they actually making any improvements to the game? And if it's a remake, I don't understand why they're not doing new audio. Surely. Um, so they are cutting a lot of corners, one way or the other. And if you're going to pick up the HD collection, the last thing I would say is pick up the 360 version, because apparently the 360 version, it runs the best